It's not often that I give up on a game, and oh dear, there goes my opinion on Always Sometimes Monsters. I feel that giving up on a game means that it's beaten you, and that the developers are somehow superior human beings to your pathetic mortal soul. However, there are two caveats that apply to this policy. First, when the game is unforgiving and stress-inducing to the point that I feel it is being detrimental to my health. Second, when the game is fucking boring. Always Sometimes Monsters is an adventure game which dresses up as an RPG and prances around in its high heels, playing with the big boys and girls. Anyway, I call it an adventure game because its central focus lies squarely on the story, and the gameplay essentially consists of a series of puzzles. The RPG element lies in the fact that the game is played top-down, and has a menu that segregates key items, making it second only to Final Fantasy. It looks like it could have run on the WonderSwan to boot. Since it's a story-driven game, I feel duty-bound to summarise the story that I experienced over the course of what I played. The story starts with a man celebrating his new job at a publisher. He then has a drink with one of several cardboard cutouts, which the player then becomes. The player then walks to the balcony of host's house and picks a person to bring back in, without being told that this person would be their love interest, as every person on the balcony reacts to the player in the same way, barring their dog. Cardboard player then toasts their publishing deal with host, and love interest adds bugger all. Cut to a year's time, and Cardboard is living alone after having split from love interest and proceeds to get evicted. After spending a day doing odd jobs for people of their acquaintance, Cardboard is forced to sleep in the street. Cardboard wakes up the next day, has an argument with the host who finally concedes that he was an idiot for hiring us, but decides to atone by letting us stay with him. The catch is that he lives $800 worth of bus journey away, so we have to do some more odd jobs for a while. Eventually, my iteration of Cardboard hitched a lift with some bloke who was fired, and arrives at host's house. They then proceed to fall out with host's wife, whereupon the game dumps us into a flashback and makes us enter random numbers, at which point I lose my patience and hit Alt F4. Now time to examine why I've so harpooned the main character, despite the fact that some of my favourite ever RPGs have less characterisation. The difference is those games rarely try to make the main character the main focus, instead concentrating on their goal and letting them take a back seat. Final Fantasy, for example, which I should really stop filleting one of these days, lets the main character say nothing ever and yet stays fun by looking at what the character does. However, if the main character is literally the only plot point, then they need writing in a way that can't be slapped onto one of about 12 different playable characters. But bland player characters are but one of the many facets to the bow of misery that is irregularly horrible. A second string is artificial gameplay elements in the form of hunger. If this runs out, I can but assume that the character dies, which would be a relief. However, I found keeping on top of hunger very tiresome, as it requires eating a frankly unreasonable volume of food. I don't know about you, viewer, but I could get by on 3 sandwiches a day if I had to, and did yesterday in fact, but our cardboard protagonist has to shovel down 5 main courses a day just to stay on top of their hunger, the greedy bastard. Now to reel off a few more complaints before we get to the big cancerous one that's occupying a second seat on the bus. First, the main motivation for most of my actions was for want of something to do. Each game day only progresses after you complete quests, and I found myself desperately looking around for something to spend the afternoon doing, giving up and then being chided for doing so. If you're hell-bent on being dull, game, don't blame me for it. Second is the fact that the game seems to be trying to make some sort of social commentary if its Steam page is anything to go by. Firstly, it has this big disclaimer about how the game deals with mature themes such as, quote, racism, sexism, homophobia, transphobia, mental health, sexual assault, child abuse, animal abuse, drug abuse, and suicide. Thanks guys, now I don't need to bother playing the game. The disclaimer feels more like an advert to say, look at how edgy and mature we are, rather than serving any purpose. Saying that these days it might just be a trigger warning. Secondly is the description itself, which claims to be opening and closing different paths along the way, based on your character's sexual preference and gender. The only divergence point I could detect was when I went shopping with host's wife and then she called me a dyke when she got angry with me. Fucking astonishing game, 4 hours in, and we found your selling point. Real great. But finally we arrive at the aforementioned tumour, and it's a big, horrible, pulsating one that would require a team of surgeons with astonishing skill and a frankly reckless disregard for patient well-being to remove. And it is smugness. The entire game is so insufferably pleased with itself, I'm frankly astonished that Devolver allowed the developers to live after handing the file over. There are several occasions where this is particularly apparent. One is a sequence where the player is at the launch of a new cinema and meets several journalists, one of which is a large, black-haired man wearing gloves and coloured glasses, who identifies as James Starling. I'm going to let that hang. Right, I'm done. What the fuck? Is that supposed to be a joke? Certainly the game thinks it is, as it's presenting him along with a whole bunch of other not-journalists from not-websites as some kind of ironic humour parade, not realising that irony is a word defined in the dictionary as humour based on using words to suggest the opposite of their literal meaning, not attempts at humour based on pop culture. It's not like it's a parody or anything. A parody would have made fun of James Starling, not just put him on a fucking platter, but this isn't the end, friends. Oh no. Second is the fact that there is a building in the game home to a game development company called Vagabond Dog. Now, where have I heard that name before? Let me think. Oh, that's right. Vagabond Dog are the developers of Always Always Awful, and they put their offices in the game, stopping just short of putting themselves in the office on a big plinth labelled "Aren't We Great?" But things still worsen as one last step is taken. The devs aren't in their office, but they are in the nearby cafe. They always have something fun to say, making funny jokes about some of the processes that were involved in the development of Always Not Interesting, which comes across as a bit self-satisfied at best, and hopelessly blind at worst. The absolute nadir of this comes when one developer says to the other that they dislike tutorials and character selectors, and that there should be metaphors instead. And see how well that fucking worked, Mr. Developer. I had a drink of white wine because that's my favourite drink, and I spoke to a woman wearing headphones because they looked a bit like mine, and ended up being a blonde lesbian lady before I knew what the fuck. The trailer says, "I know that I chose you," in reference to the central romance, but I don't think I did. I didn't know I was choosing you. You had no distinguishing features whatsoever beyond the whole headphones thing. Anyway, I guess I need to conclude, but there is one thing on which this recommendation still hangs. The entire game is presented as a story being told by a homeless man at gunpoint, which an assassin encounters in the prologue. The assassin has the choice to listen to the story or shoot the man, presumably meaning that if he does the latter, the game will never happen. Wouldn't that be nice? Hang on, I'll go play it now. "10 out of 10, best game ever."